Today we're going to bring you a classic. This is definitely one for your library if you haven't got hold of this already. This is called Shambhala and Agrata, Cities Within the Earth. Because for many years, the master teacher, Pandavabi Anun, was teaching us about a subterranean world in the earth. And people were like disputing it and saying like, there's no such thing, because a lot of people didn't believe that the earth was actually hollow, because people talk about the eruptions from the volcanoes and say that there's lava. That means the planet cannot be hollow. But this scroll debunked all of that and goes into it and explaining even the residents that live in the earth. So what we're going to do is read some of it, and I'm going to jump and skip around because it's really one that you need to get hold of for yourself. So let's get into it. Shambhala and Agatha, Cities Within the Earth, scroll number 131 by Parnabhabyanun. This scroll came out late 80s, early 90s, and it was explaining about the cities within the earth. During that time, we were still going through the schools of religions, and we were known as the Holy Tabernacle Ministries. All right, so the introduction. The fact that there are subterranean worlds and people living in the interior of the earth is not a secret. In fact, this is quite ancient. In all of the ancient teachings of the Egyptians, the Zoroastrians, Mayans, Hindus, etc., there are legends of the inner world. Behind every legend, there can be found some truth, a group of facts around which the legend was built. In the Egyptian Book of the Dead, a strange and mysterious boatman had charge of the souls of the dead. The boat would either transport the human soul up into the region of the stars, or if the soul needed more basic training or possibly more discipline, the boatman would pilot the souls along the river Styx, and this river led deep down into the interior of the earth. Many of the chambers of the pyramids lead to the inner world, because that's one of the questions. People say, well, how do I go to this place or go into this subterranean world? And he's saying here that chambers of the pyramids lead to the inner world, and he actually has a picture of himself to prove this. And he says in figure 1, this is myself going into the step pyramid of Saqqara, which leads to the center of the earth. A legend of the first Inca, Manco Capac, related that he and his followers, the founders of the Inca realm, came from underground caves, while the people of that time had great respect for snakes because of Uruguay, the god of underground treasures. This god is depicted as a large snake whose tail has a hanging pendant from it with the head of a deer and many little gold chains. In Southern and Central America, as well as in Mexico, the ancient people did acknowledge the existence of subterranean caves, chambers, or tunnels. The Zoroastrians of Mexico believe that just as there are 13 heavens, sometimes 9 or 12, there are 9 subterrestrial levels through which the deceased must pass before reaching the underworld, Mixtlan, land of the dead, also called Chikonamitalan, not an easy one to pronounce, the 9th place of the dead. The lord of this underworld is Mixtlantecuhtli, the lord of the dead. And there's a figure 2, showing the vessel as thought to be Mixtlantecuhtli. The mayors of the Yucatan also believed in the existence of underworlds. They were ice cold, as are most subterranean chambers or tunnels. These underworlds were presided over by Arpuch, the Lord of Death. The underground in the Mayan sacred writings, Popova, as well as the book of Chilam Balam of Chumayel. Excuse some of the pronunciations, not easy word to pronounce. When Peru and Chile were ruled by the Incas, they also revealed knowledge of the underground. Paya, the god of death, had an underground dwelling, a much feared place of darkness. Pachacumchi, the god of the earth, caused underground rumbles in subterranean places where huge stones fell after he had shaken the earth. In the small village of Casal Paola, Italy, in the year 1902 AD, workmen who were digging a well literally fell into the earth. What they discovered, or rather rediscovered, was the outer room of the Maltese cave entrance. Since the well was to be dug for a house which was on the main street named Hypodrome of Hal Saflianti, named after the street beneath in which it was discovered. The hyperdome is the Latin name for an underground structure. Later, this series of underground rooms was discovered to have been located in the middle of an ancient Neolithic village from the construction of the entrance stones. It is now assumed that at certain times a human sacrifice was chained before the entrance. The entrance and the walls and ceilings of some of the passageways and rooms have been found to be decorated with red ochre and primitive art designs. However, when first discovered, 3 caves were crammed with as many as 30,000 skeletons of men, women, and children. And again, there's a diagram, figure 3, of the underground tomb, all right? And it was made out of limestone. And it goes on and on. It actually shows the picture of the cave, but I'm gonna jump and skip so we can get to some more of the inner facts. It says, if you don't believe me, this is from page 4 now, go investigate. These cities will serve as an escape when catastrophe hits the planet Earth. Now, taking into consideration that the population of Lucerne outnumbers the space availability in the underground city, means that everybody won't be there. This tunnel could be another link to one of the caverns to the inner world. And it shows you the location in Switzerland where the underground city is located. In a book written by Maurice Dorel, born Claude Duggins, who is the highly respected founder of the Brotherhood of the White Temple in Sedalia, Colorado, says that in ancient teaching, the earth is hollow and inhabited. In Dorel's book entitled The Inner Earth, he describes the inner earth according to ancient teachings. The ancients say that only the outer crust of the earth is subject to heat from a layer of hot lava near the surface, volcanoes, because that's what people say. They say that the earth cannot be hollow because of the lava, and they say that the eruptions of volcanoes, etc., shows that the inner earth doesn't exist. But they don't realize that that's just dealing with the layers on top, but there are many layers before you get to the subterranean world. Anyway, so volcanoes are due to that hot layer. However, if you were to go down into the earth 150 miles, there will be no more uncomfortable heat. Now, it's quite comfortable in temperature, and there is a vast system of caverns and tunnels. It is said that a series of great caves and channels is to be found inside the earth, just below the belt of the lava. One of those channels completely encircles the earth inside, so that you could ride all around the inside of the world through the channel and come back to the point you started from. Going deeper below those caves and channels, you come to some huge room caverns, some so big. Dorel states that a whole city could be lost within its huge spaces. However, down further than those big rooms is the fascinating part. You now enter the deepest inner circle of the earth. Here is a tremendous hollow space, and the exact center of the hollow space, floating freely, you will see what looks like a small version of your sun. It's the central globe or sun inside the earth, which energizes the inner earth. Then there are the movies that were made decades ago telling you about the inner world. And there is an artist's illustration of the black sun, which is the sun they refer to being in the inner earth. And then there are movies like the Voyage to the Center of the Earth was one such movie. Movies are not the only means by which this information is being put out. There have been many books that have been published on this topic, as well as an example of this in a novel written in 1951 AD, which a kingdom named Agartha is described as existing beneath the surface of the earth of Antarctica. See? So the novel actually is written by Robert Dickhoff, is said to be about one of a large number of subterranean empires conjured up by the imaginative writers. Information about the underground is even in children's comic and adventure books, in a series of adventure books written by Edward Packard, one entitled Underground Kingdom. Okay, so it explains and goes on, and the master is saying I'm skipping a bit now. He says, now I'm going to give you the entire truth and fact. I've been telling you for over 25 years, this was obviously at the time, that there is a subterranean world and is occupied by many different types of beings. When I introduced the name Shambhala and Agartha in 1965, right? So that's how far back he introduced this in 1965 AD. To the public, people called me crazy. And now in the 90s, when this was published, the media is running stories all over the world about these two cities. So it says, question, well, what and where is Shambhala and Agartha? And it says, what and where is Shambhala and Agartha, you ask? Shambhala is the capital of the biggest subterranean world. This place of illumination within the earth has a central sun which is 600 miles in diameter. The inner city is called Agartha, meaning through the hole. The temple within this subterranean world is called the Golden Palace, or in Ashuric Syriac Arabic, Wahala, meaning place of illumination, or with the golden aura, which is located in the capital called Shambhala, meaning centered by Allah. Shambhala is a combination of the word Shama, meaning sent, and Allah, which gives you the most beautiful sense of Allah. One of the most outstanding characteristics of Shambhala is that those beings who visit or live in Shambhala, bodies carrying unique sweet scent. It is a scent of presence of Allah. Shambhala itself is the holy place where the earthly world links with the higher states of consciousness. The city Shambhala is also known as Ishara. There are also crafts that come from the center of the earth. As a matter of fact, many crafts seen by people on the surface comes from various caverns beneath the planet Earth. So when you look at most people will tell you when they look at the planet Earth, right, you will have like what's considered, let's say this is the north, and then you'll have like what's considered the south, yeah? So this will be like, and then you have, in fact, we'll show you the diagram. You have many like layers, and then in the center, and within these layers is where you have like, depending on how far down you're going, let's put one more layer, yeah, you know, volcanoes and eruptions and things like might only be like to that level down, and then we see it come up. But you saw when there were orbs last year, and people were telling you that they would go into the waters or come out from the top or come out from the bottom. Yeah, so the central sun they refer to as the black sun. And we'll go into Hitler was in contact and knew about this as well, because you had the Antarctica as well, where there are many entrances like at different points around the planet. So the master was just explaining about, like, for example, you might have the pyramids, say, on the surface here, and then as you go down into the cavern, there's entrances into the earth. Let's keep going. So he says there are also crafts that come from the center. You had technology and beings in the caverns that will develop technology or crafts which are aerodynamic, that will come out, yeah, and people will see these crafts and call them, you know, flying saucers or whatever, and these crafts will come out from these entrances and go back in. Shambhala is a galactical United Nations as opposed to an Earth United Nations. Shambhala has the largest library and the medical library on this side of the galaxy. When we talk about the Galactic Federation, they will come and they will meet and have meetings and so forth in Shambhala. Shambhala has climate control. There are no volcanoes and earthquakes. Environment control implies that there is disease control. There are no years, months, and days, being that the sun is in the center of inner world and the planet is not moving around anything. There's no war and no speciesism, which is like racism, as we have on the planet. So our planet, I'm going to have to draw, let's say, a bigger version. So this is the sun, all right? Our planet, yeah, rotating around this sun, okay, is why we have days and months and seasons and things like that, because it's dealing with, you know, depending on which side it's facing. Because remember, you also have the satellite, the moon, which is a satellite of the earth. So when the moon when the moon is between the sun and the earth, there's a shadow, right? And then when it rotates the other way around, so when the moon's on this side, you're going to be facing that side of the sun where we have what people call day and night. But let's carry on. So inside Shambhala, there is no racism, as in speciesism, because you have different species that reside in Shambhala and they don't have any like diseases because they have disease control, they have climate control, etc. The master doesn't play. There's a picture of Shambhala, the capital of the subterranean world, and there's also a diagram showing you the sun and the inner earth can be reached by entrances at the poles. That's the North Pole and the South Pole to the center of the inner earth. Okay, let's keep going. How could the earth, this is what people were saying there, how could the earth that is solid have an inner world? The master answers the question by saying, that is the point. Your planet is not a solid rock. There are three major divisions in the earth. You have inner core, you have the outer core, and then you have the crust. So the crust is here, and then you have the inner core and the outer core. And the crust is very thin. It's a very thin layer. It is called a mantle. So just because the Earth's surface is 197,474 million square miles and the weight is 6 trillion tons, right? So the weight of the planet is 6 trillion tons. Doesn't make it a solid. If your planet was a solid rock, then its weight would be much more. There isn't anything on this planet that is a solid. That's a very important point because everything vibrates when you start to look at the composition and the breakdown of things. Everything is composed of atoms and there are spaces between the atoms, which means that nothing is really solid. And as you dive into the atom, you start to find out that you're really dealing with packets of energy and not really anything solid. So the master is explaining here that there isn't anything on this planet that is a solid. So why should the earth be? Beneath your very feet is a region whose radius is 6,294 kilometers. So of course, when you're talking about the radius, you know that you have a circumference, you have the diameter, right? And then if you cut the diameter in half, you would have the radius. So that the half is what we just read, that's the radius. The entire from one side to the other side is the diameter, yeah? And so this is also show you that how you can cut the diameter in half to get to the radius, and in that middle or the center point is where you're going to find the sun. The Earth's radius, right? So again, I just mentioned that the Earth's radius is going to be half the diameter, right? So that's 3,693 miles, 693 miles. So that's the radius, yeah? So if you double that, you get the diameter, which is coming up to be 6,294 kilometers. Then the half of that, which I was just saying, the 3,000, is talking about the radius from the pyramids in Egypt, right? So the Earth's radius is 3,693 miles from the pyramids in Egypt. But again, with these numbers, depending on what method of measurement you're using and the fact that things do fluctuate slightly. So sometimes people will say that's not exactly accurate. But there's a diagram here that demonstrates that. So we go on to say, have people ever explored the inner world? Yes. However, the existence of the inner world has been denied so much until people assume that it is fiction. However, it is a fact that the inner world does exist and it does have inhabitants. Many people have reached the inner world as far back as in the 1950s. Whether it was by accident or intentional, people have given different accounts of how they got there and their experiences while they were there. And one of the people that is famous for this is a person called Richard Shaver. In the article entitled UFOs, The Shaver Mystery and the Hollow Earth by Gene Steinberg, author Richard Shaver speaks of a journey that he took to the center of the earth and the ancient people that he says he encountered. Shaver claimed that the earth is honeycombed with caverns and that these caverns extend incredible distances into the earth and that they are still inhabited with descendants of a race of people who left the earth about 12,000 years ago. There's a picture of that book The Amazing Stories, The Shaver Mysteries. Shaver claimed that he could hear voices and see visual projections of people who existed beneath the surface of the planet Earth. He was told that when the Earth was young, the Earth was visited by a race of beings who came from another solar system. He called this race the Elder Gods, who with their advances in science and knowledge of DNA and RNA manipulation were able to live to be hundreds of years old. They also discovered the secret of life and death, for the elders know that death is an illness in humans that can be cured or prolonged. These elder gods were the Shuyuk or the Riskians from the planet Risk in the 19th galaxy Ilion. Early humans that existed on Earth at that time considered them as gods. These highly intelligent beings built a large computer called Mech, from where they get the word Macintosh. Its original name was Al-Hisabat, and the master was explaining this many years ago. So today, when we're teaching you of the elders, known as the overseers, the Riskians, these are the beings that they're talking about that were referred to as the elder gods. The Macintosh, where you get the Mac computers from, with these machines, they could scan the surface, pick up scenes from all over the planet, or televise them. They could project both thought and three-dimensional images, kill and destroy at will by simply flicking switches, extract thoughts from another person's mind or implant thoughts into it. They were able to stimulate any emotion, cure various diseases, alter the weather, and create natural calamities. They also had mech, which could be used to make clothing, food, and other articles. They could also kill and cause destruction just by the flip of switches. The disagreeable ones among them also built a large computer. It was called HAL, H-A-L, and their Earth counterpart made an offshoot of the HAL called IBM. And when you look at the letters I, B, and M, you look at the letters H comes before I, the letter A comes before B, and the letter L comes before M. So it says over a period of time, the inner sun started throwing off radioactive particles which polluted the air breathed into the lungs and accumulated in food and water, causing a shortening of their lifespan by increasing the aging process and causing other effects. The Shuyuk trying to escape bored underground, hollowing out artificially or modifying already existing natural caverns with a device similar to a laser beam. They proceeded to build large cities with tunnels connecting them 4 to 20 miles beneath the surface. Many relocated to another planet and took some of their mech or hasaba with them. One group of agreeable elders wanted to make these devices available to surface dwellers. However, the disagreeable group disagreed because the surface dwellers were unskilled and were not able to use the computers correctly. There was an argument between the two groups, and it was decided to keep the computers locked away in a cavern in the earth so that surface dwellers couldn't get to them because of the population problem. The elder race was not able to take all of their own race. The ones who were left behind began to disintegrate due to the radioactivity of the sun. After centuries had passed, because of the radioactivity and the unskilled use of these massive computers, a large amount of the brains of the other beings that were in the inner world produced a form of hereditary insanity. And there's a picture of the Riskians. I'm going to jump and skip. There's a picture of an obese woman who is a descendant of the Deros. If you haven't seen our videos on Alien yet, go and watch that, because we cover these beings like the Deros and why people or offspring on the planet have, their traits. We also spoke about other beings such as the Teros being from Jomon in the star, because people keep asking about Octorians or the beings from Octorus. So let me touch on that. The Teros came from the planet Jomon in the star constellation of Taurus, which is in the Boots constellation. Arcturus, the red giant, the fourth brightest star in the heaven, is where much mixing took place. So you have the Sunayans have 48 chromosomes instead of the normal Earth people's 46. The Teros chromosome structure is so different from Earthlings that when mixed with certain humans cause a defect of 47 chromosomes, which is today called Down syndrome. All right. Then you have beings like the Dwanis. You have other people that were telepathically influenced by the beings in the center of the earth. And there's pictures of what the inner world looked like. But what I do want to touch on before we conclude the excerpt for today from this scroll is the relation with Hitler and him being exposed to the inner world. Obviously, it also talks about Admiral Richard Byrd, who was another person that flew into the inner world by accident. All right, here we go. The bit I want to talk about is on page 41, dealing with, how Hitler was involved with the inner world. All right. I'm going to read from a page before. It's just talking about the Byrd story, Admiral Byrd, right? It says, if you take a closer look at the Byrd story, there are some important dates and historical facts that were left out intentionally. The dates do not match up. What do I mean by this? It is a fact that in 1946 AD, under the disguise of a scientific expedition, 8 nations sent a cooperative military mission to Antarctica, okay? Because a lot of people keep asking today, like, why can't we go past the walls? And the flat earth people talk about, that it's being heavily guarded and there's a lot going on in Antarctica. The master is explaining here that the American mission was led by Admiral Richard E. Byrd, right? Who commanded a fleet of 13 fully armed U.S. Navy ships and 4,000 men. Byrd was sent by his government not to explore, however, to wipe out the Nazis and capture their arsenal. Unfortunately for Byrd, the Allies had not counted on just how advanced the Germans had become. Because as I say, when you read this, you find out how Hitler was in contact with beings from Aldebaran who gave him certain technology by way of a medium known as Madame Blavatsky. When Admiral Byrd was carrying out this mission, he didn't realize how advanced the Germans had become because Hitler had been in contact with these extraterrestrials. So when Byrd located the Nazi base early in 1947 AD, he dropped an American flag there to warn Hitler. However, the Fuhrer responded to the Byrd's warning with their combat within 48 hours. 4 of Byrd's planes had been lost, some without a trace and others without any survivors. Byrd was given 8 weeks to pull it off. However, the entire war was over in 8 days. They also thought that Hitler turned cannons on Byrd's troops, paralyzing and disorienting them to the point that they were helpless. Admiral R.E. Byrd aborted all his efforts and left with the remainder of his soldiers for home. He realized he had met more than his match. Of course, all reports about Byrd's defeat were silenced. Once back in Washington, Byrd suggested dropping atomic bombs in Antarctica. Before his proposal could reach the newspapers, believe it or not, a large fleet of UFOs was sighted flying over in German formation. After the sighting, nothing more was said about dropping atomic bombs on Antarctica. Admiral Byrd eventually tried to tell people what he had seen in the inner world. However, no one believed him. He went insane soon afterwards. This is one important part of the Admiral R.E. Byrd story and history that is always left out. There were and are many nations that know about the center of the earth. It is just a matter of whether they want the general public to know or not. Then there's a question. Did the Nazis know about the inner world? Answer, yes. What most people don't realize is that there is more to the Nazi Germans than what is told. The Nazis were not just a bunch of warmongers. Most people don't know it. However, the Germans under Adolf Hitler were one of the first nations to reach the inner earth. Hitler assembled a team of elite and intelligent scientists and engineers who were experts in many fields, including aerodynamics. These men consisted of Adjutant Bruckner, press chief Beatrix, chief photographer Hoffman, surgeon Dr. Brandt, head of secret police Heinrich Himmler, chief physician Dr. Moreau, ordnance officer H. Schwartz, army adjutant Engel, personal advisor. Some of these words are very hard to pronounce, German words. And then he goes on to list other people that they had and the weapons that he had or they were creating. Flying disc, combat tank formed from one solid piece, sound waves which would destroy the mind, advanced laser beams, flaming artificial clouds, super robot bomb, electrical charge cloud, sensational shell pierce armor, electromagnetic KM2 rockets, paralyzing ray guns, electronic lightning ball, the flying bottle tube. The Reich's main weapon was the flying saucer, which was capable of going speeds beyond 2,000 miles per hour. The construction of flying discs started as far back as the 1930s. By the end of World War II, the Germans had built and flown 3 prototype saucers based on designs made by the German engineer Victor Schwarzberger. Germans made crafts that could go around the Earth and to Mars on a truckload of gasoline. In the 1960s, the first family of German crafts that were produced were the Virile interceptive fighters. Virile is also the name of a secret society which was 30 feet in diameter. So this scroll goes into great detail about the whole Ashtar command that were in contact with Adolf Hitler and why he almost won. A lot of people think that he lost, but the master teacher goes on to explain in this book that you had different aspects of the German army, like the Third Reich being a separate part. You think that they lost, and even Hitler himself in here explains that he actually escaped and went back in time, and he had a lot of doubles. You see, a lot of people don't realize that he had doubles that would impersonate or act on his behalf. So when they found the clones or the doubles, they claimed they got him, but in fact he escaped and went back in time. There's a movie called The Boys from Brazil, and you can watch that to deal with what I'm talking about in terms of the cloning and so forth. But we're not going to give all the secrets away. There's a diagram here on page 49 that is similar to the one I've drawn there, showing you crafts going in and out of the inner world. It explains about the different crafts that were building, the technologies back then. So you can imagine where it is today. We're going to round off. I think it's a very important scroll for you to get hold of. It links in with the shaggy beans and extraterrestrials, greys, and the ones that were actually discovered from New Mexico and how it ties in. I'm just scanning through now, but it explains and goes into the American presidents like Ronald Reagan, Eisenhower, even the Russian leader Gorbachev. All of these people, they're aware of the inner earth, but as usual, the master teacher put this out in the 90s, and everything that is in this scroll has come to pass or is happening today. You can read all about it in this scroll, which is available right now. We'll put the link below. All right, so that's Shambhala and Agathar, the cities within the earth. We just touched on certain aspects of it, but you can get the full story in this scroll. All right, tawat, until the next time, wadu.